Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Greer and it's lovely to have you here with me today. I figured that since we're coming down to the end of 2022, it would be interesting for me to share with you some of the content that I've enjoyed throughout the year. So sort of a favorites video, if you will. There are a few categories that I've divided these favorites into, and I figured since I didn't want to make this video too long, I would do it in two parts. So in the first part, I'm going to be talking about books, music, and newsletters. And in the second part, we're going to be talking about podcasts, apps, games, and television. I do want to give a bit of a disclaimer before I get into the favorites. You probably noticed that I am filming outside today, so there may be a bit of background noise, but I figured it would be nice to have a little bit of a change of scenery for this video. Okay, so let's get started with books. One of the first books I want to talk about is Black Cake by Charmaine Wilkerson. This book is a very gripping family saga about a matriarch. It starts off after her death and it follows the events of her life until her death and the impact that some of her choices had on her family. It is set in different locations in different time periods, so it sort of goes back and forth between the US, the UK, and the Caribbean. It's a book that feels like home, especially if you're part of the Caribbean diaspora. There are certain things that are going to be very familiar to you. You know, the dialect used by some of the characters, the cultural references, the food. Black Cake, as the title suggests. It really shows you how culture can bring people back together even after they've been separated by distance. It touches on the difference between being a first and second generation Caribbean person, and it is, without giving too much away, it's certainly a page turner that I would recommend. And I also wanted to give special mention to two short story collections by two of my favorite authors. One is Unaccustomed Earth by Jhumpa Lahiri, and the second is The Thing Around Your Neck by Chimamanda and Ngozi Adichie. I think at this point I've read every single book by both of those authors. They are just masters of their craft. So as I said, both of those books are short story collections, and I think it takes a very special kind of writer to be able to evoke, you know, such poignant emotions within the limits of a short story. You know, there's only so much that you can do and there's only so much you can develop within a short story. But I like what Jhumpa Lahiri does. Her stories revolve a lot around the Indian community and diaspora, and of course Chimamanda, her stories, a lot of them revolve around the African community and the diaspora. There's so many cultural references, so many different things that you can learn. The characters are so well developed. They're real, they're flawed. Their characters are always embroiled in real life. You don't ever feel like there's some kind of airy fairy element to any of their stories. You know, there's always real life situations, whether that's dealing with having to leave your home, or marriage and infidelity, death, love, relationships. There's always something that you can relate to. So definitely there are two other highlights that I wanted to share with you. The next book is Cosmos by Carl Sagan. As I mentioned in my previous video, Carl Sagan is one of my favorite intellectuals. The book Cosmos is an account of the universe at the time it was written. Sagan talks about the origins of the universe, important people who were instrumental in giving us the tools that we use today to observe the universe, from Johannes Kepler to Isaac Newton. He also talks about the theory of evolution and man's search for extraterrestrial life. The book was written in 1980, which is approximately 42 years ago. So obviously there has been a lot of technological advancement since then. I often wonder what Carl Sagan would think about some of those advancements, you know, things like the James Webb telescope, which is unlike any telescope that has ever been built and sent off into space, or companies like SpaceX that are sending people to the moon. But I think he would probably be in favor of that just because he was a proponent of the search for extraterrestrial life. What I enjoy about this book is that even though it details a lot of scientific concepts, Sagan has a way of explaining those concepts in layman's terms, and I think this would be a great book for anyone who is interested in the universe, its origins, or even if you're not interested in learning about the planets and laws of physics, which again are explained in very simple terms by Sagan. I think if you just want to get some context for your existence that is separate from religion, then this is a great read for you. All right, now let's talk about some newsletters. I definitely read a lot more content from newsletters this year than I ever have. I think what I was scared about with newsletters is that I didn't want to have them sort of cluttering up my email inbox. But what I was able to do is set up a specific RSS feed in Feedly, which is my RSS reader, so that I could access newsletters when I wanted to see them and not just have them come into my inbox and then have to sort through them, because I like to have a very clean email inbox. So the first newsletter I'd like to recommend to you is Dense Discovery. Like the name suggests, it's sort of a repository for discovering new tools and resources that really expand your knowledge and interests. It is produced by Kai Brach. Each issue begins with Kai giving an introduction where he talks about a topic that is relevant or a current event that he wants to give his take on, and then the issue goes into recommendations for books, apps, articles, interesting videos. There's, I think in every issue that I've seen so far, there's been sort of a Q&A with an interesting person. It's just really thought-provoking. I love the way it's laid out. It's very minimal. There's a new issue every week, but you can also access previous issues in the archive just to get a feel for the kind of content that's in there. The next newsletter I want to talk about is called Letters of Note, and it's published by Sean Usher. What Sean does is he sources and compiles history's most interesting letters that are written by some of the most influential figures that we know, from Virginia Woolf to Khalil Gibran to Audre Lorde. It's amazing how many letters he's been able to unearth over the period of time that he has been producing this work. It's a tribute to written correspondence and the art of letter writing. This is something that I wish I had learned about sooner, as somebody who is very sentimental, loves the written word, loves observing interactions between people. And if that's something that's interesting to you, I'd highly recommend this newsletter as well. It's just fascinating to be able to get into the minds of influential people. Okay, so now we're going to move on to music. I'm going to try not to belabor this one. You know, as someone who is a big fan of music, it was sort of difficult for me to narrow down my favorites. I did try to use my Spotify Wrapped as a guide for this, and so if we're going according to my Spotify Wrapped, we're going to start off with my favorite artist of the year, Mereba. I would say that her genre is a mix of R&B, hip-hop, even indie, folk. Her music has this very ethereal soundscape, and she's just a wonderful lyricist as well. Her album AZEB actually came out last year, but it was only until this year that I started getting into it a bit more. The song Gold particularly was a favorite of mine. It just feels like, you know, a soft spot to land. It really helped me to continue having a positive outlook as we continue to deal with things like the pandemic. You can tell that her work comes from a connection to something greater than herself. Some other artists who sort of evoked that same kind of feeling of, you know, peace and just being completely at peace with yourself for me this year were Raveena. Her album Asha's Awakening also came out this year, and Millett. Her album When Everything's Better I'll Let You Know released, I think it was in October, and one of my other favorite songs of this year, Heal, was on that album. I ran that song into the ground when it first came out. It's essentially about recognizing the work that you have to do on yourself and knowing that even when it's difficult, you know, you have to make that commitment to be better. And it just feels like that song was made for me, you know. It's like she's talking to me. I just feel like she's so emotional and raw on that track. Switching over to rap, I would say that I'm someone who enjoys lyrical rap most of all, and there's an artist who I think is particularly underrated in the rap scene. His name is Westside Boogie. He's from Compton, California, and his album More Black Superheroes was released this year. Like I said, I like when rap tells a story. I like when artists are able to lay their emotions bare on an album and just be vulnerable, and I think Westside Boogie does that very well. He also had the opportunity to do a Tiny Desk concert with NPR recently. I really enjoyed that one. I'm gonna make sure that I link it in the description. Two other rappers who I think are also very good storytellers whose projects I enjoyed this year were Loyle Carner. His project Hugo came out this year, as well as Saba, I think that's how you pronounce it. His album Few Good Things also came out this year, so I'd highly recommend those if you're into rap at all. And then I could not talk about music without giving a special mention to two of my favorite bands. The first being Hovvdy. Their album Billboard for My Feelings was released this year. Really enjoyed that. And then of course the 1975. Now I have to admit I do feel like a bit of a disloyal fan because I haven't been following them that much this year, but I did listen to Being Funny in a Foreign Language, and not surprising, they are just as socially conscious as ever, and that's what I really enjoy about the 1975's music, apart from their musical genius, of course. All right, so I think I'm gonna end part one here. The sun is baking me at this point, so I'm gonna take a bit of a break, but do be sure to come back for part two of this video, where I'm gonna be talking about podcasts, apps, games, and television. If you're watching this by the time the second video has already come out, you're going to be able to find it somewhere here. I'm going to be sure to link it there. But until then, take good care, and I'll see you in part two. Bye.